Picture this. It's the dead of night in a village on the coast of Portugal. The wind carries up the roar of the Atlantic, and in a small chamber, a child is sleeping, only a few days old. Above the cradle, the mother has hung a pair of scissors, opened in the shape of a cross. Under the pillow lies a piece of iron. She has pinned rosemary to the door and sewn garlic into the hem of the little gown. She's done everything her grandmother drilled into her. Everything. And still she lies awake. Because this is the most dangerous hours, between midnight and 2. Outside, above the rooftops, you hear it first. A love. A bright, clapping love, high up in the dark, where nothing should be. Then a shadow across the moon. Too big for an owl, too silent for a bird. She's looking for a gap, a crack in the wood, a knothole, the keyhole, because a Bruxa needs no door. She makes herself small, thin as smoke, and flows through. The mother feels it before she sees it, a weight settling on her chest. She tries to sit up, tries to scream, and can't. Not a muscle obeys. She lies there, awake, paralyzed, and over her child's cradle a figure bends down. A figure that a moment ago was a bird, and now is a woman. Beautiful, pale, with black hair, and she leans down toward the child as if to kiss it.
Tick, tick, down the hall. Great tales, call it by name. Great tales, shadows remain. Tick, 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 time keeps its stare. Great tales, something is there.
Hello and welcome back to Great Tales. I'm Chris and I'm so glad to have you here. This is part 4, the finale of our little series on the real myth behind the monsters of The Witcher. And today we are doing something that I saved up for the end. We leave the Slavic world behind. For 3 episodes we were in the east and the center of Europe, Lady Midday in the field, the striga in the crypt, the leshy in the forest. And you may remember the thought that ran through all of it, that these stories are mirrors, that they tell us more about the people who told them than about the monsters themselves. Today we travel south to Portugal, to Spain, to Galicia, because the last creature of our journey is deliberately not a Slavic one. It's the Bruxa. In The Witcher, you know her as a beautiful, pale vampire with black hair who transformed into a winged monster and kills you with a scream. And I'm going to show you this very Bruxa leads us back, all the way back to the ancient Romans. And with that, back to a creature we've already met. Today, the circle closes. Part 4 of 4, the grand finale. Let's begin. Beauty and the Beast, Verena. As always, we begin with The Witcher, and this time with one of the saddest stories in the whole saga. In the tale A Grain of Truth, in Polish Ziarno Prawdy, published in 1989 and collected in The Last Wish, Geralt comes to a remote manor house. There lives Nivellen, a man transformed by a curse into a beast, half human, half animal. And Nivellen isn't alone. With him lives a beautiful young woman with raven black hair and skin so pale it seems almost transparent. Her name is Verena. She loves Nivellen, and she's a Bruxa. Sapkowski paints her as beautiful and deadly at once. Her true form is a bat-like creature with fangs and claws. She can turn herself invisible, and her most terrible weapon is a scream. A blast of sound that throws a man off his feet. The very title gives away Sapkowski's game. It's an inverted Beauty and the Beast story, except that here both are beasts. In the end, Verena dies, and it is her blood mingled with love that breaks Nivellen's curse. And now, notice a detail Sapkowski himself painted almost like a greeting sent across the books. The Bruxa, with her deadly scream, her girl's face, her thirst for blood. She is the twin sister of another creature we already know, the striga from part 2. The striga too was a girl. She too drank blood. She too threw Geralt to the ground with a scream. Sapkowski deliberately tied the two monsters together. Hold on to that. It's no accident. It's the thread of this whole episode. In the games, especially in the Blood and Wine expansion of 2016, the Bruxa becomes the elegant, supremely dangerous higher vampire, a naked pale woman who flips into a winged beast. One of them, Oriana, moves through high society and runs an orphanage that is in truth her private blood cellar. A grisly yet perfect idea. But now, as always, comes the uncomfortable question. What if this is real? And what did the storytellers invent? The real Bruxa. The answer? The invisible scream, the tragic love, the status of a noble higher vampire. All of this is invention. Beautiful invention, yet invention. The real Bruxa of Portuguese folk belief was no tragic romantic feature. She was a nightmare over the cradle. In Portuguese folklore, two kinds of witch were cleanly distinguished. There's the feiticeira, the sorceress who brews potions and casts spells for money. A service provider, you might say. And then there's the Bruxa, and she is something else entirely. The Bruxa serves the devil, flies by night, and sucks people dry, like a vampire. Garlic keeps her away, like a vampire. Our most detailed old source for this is an Englishman, Oswald Crawford, British consul in Porto, who in 1880 recorded the folk belief of northern Portugal in his book Portugal, Old and New. Crawford describes them. Bruxas are abroad at night. They give themselves away by laughing and clapping. They turn into waterfowl, fly through the air, swim in the rivers. And they are most dangerous between midnight and 2 in the morning. Their favorite victims? Newborns. They squeeze through the smallest cracks to reach the cradle. The scholarly foundation is Portuguese. José Leite de Vasconcelos, the founder of Portuguese ethnography, documented exactly this belief from 1882 onwards in works like Tradiciones Populares de Portugal, and the protections he and others collected you already know from the intro. Iron, an open pair of scissors in the shape of a cross, bread, salt, rosemary, garlic, a red wool thread around the child's neck, saints' medals. A whole armor of things against the woman who comes in the night. The circle closes, the strix. And now comes the moment this whole series has been building toward. Because where does the Bruxa really come from? I have to be honest, and that's part of what I stand for. The word Bruxa is a riddle. Its origin is disputed to this day. Some linguists suspect a pre-Roman Celtic word behind it. Brixta. Spell. The great etymologist Corominas simply said, of uncertain origin. Nobody knows for sure, and I promise you nothing else. But, and this is the crucial part, the creature itself is no riddle. Look at what a Bruxa does. A woman who flies by night, slips through cracks into houses, and drinks the blood of infants. This creature is ancient, and she has a name that will sound familiar to you. She's called the strix. You remember in part 2 with the striga, we have already met her. The strix is an ancient Roman night owl, a bird demon that drank the blood of children in their cradles. The poet Ovid describes her around the year 8 AD in his works Fasti. Birds with great heads and hooked beaks that fly by night and drink the blood of infants. And the ancient historian Daniel Ogden showed in his 2021 book The Strix Witch that behind this lies an ancient pattern. The idea of the woman who turns into a bird by night to take the newborns in their homes. A line that runs from Mesopotamia through Ovid's Rome all the way into the vampire novels of the 19th century. And now look at what happened. From this single Roman strix, daughters sprang up all across Europe. In Italian, the striga, the witch. In Romanian, the strigoi, the undead. In Polish, in part 2, the striga, our strix or striga. And on the Iberian Peninsula, under a completely different riddling name, the same creature, the Bruxa. Do you hear that? The striga from the Polish crypt and the Bruxa from the Portuguese coast. They aren't related. They are simply the same creature, the same ancient fear, just in 2 languages. Sapkowski, perhaps without knowing it, was right when he made Verena and the striga sisters. They are sisters, and they have been for 2000 years. That's the circle that closes today. There is even a neat proof of it right in the middle of Spain. In Asturia, they know a cousin of the Bruxa, Duguaxa, an old witch with a single long tooth she uses to suck the blood of sleeping children. And the folklorist Aurelio de Ziarno already derived her name back in 1922 directly from the Latin striga or strix. The trail was there the whole time. You only had to turn the name around. Quickly, before we come to the darkest turn. If this series has carried you through all 4 parts, if you enjoyed it, then please do me a favor, drop a like and a subscribe. That's the best gift for the finale. Always remember, you are the ones who made this little journey possible in the first place. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. No need for garlic over the door here. You're always welcome, right? Take one more deep breath, because now we leave the legend behind and step into history. And history is worse. When the Bruxa got a face, Zugarramurdi. Because the Bruxa didn't stay in the grandmother's tales. At some point, she got a face. A real one. The face of a neighbor. In 1609, in the Basque mountain village of Zugarramurdi, near the French border, a panic broke out. It began with rumors. Rumors of nocturnal gatherings in a cave, of the aquelarre, the witches' Sabbath, of pacts with the devil in the shape of a goat, of witches who sucked the blood of children. The Spanish Inquisition stepped in. And what followed was the largest witch investigation in history. Between 2,000 and 7,000 people were examined. 11,000 pages of testimony were collected. By comparison, Salem examined around 200. On the 7th of November 1610, a great auto de la fe was held at Logroño. About 53 defendants were judged. 6 people were burned alive. 5 more, who had already died in prison, were burned in effigy as straw dummies. Real people, mostly women, dead for a creature out of a nursery tale. But, and this may be the most important story in this whole series, there was one man who refused to play along. One of the 3 inquisitors, the youngest, was named Alonso de Salazar Frías. While his colleagues collected confessions, Salazar did something radical. He tested them. He traveled the Basque country with an edict of grace, questioned thousands of supposed witches, and above all, collected their retractions, most of them from children. He searched for a single piece of tangible proof, a single genuinely bewitched person, a single real Sabbath. And he found nothing. In his report of 1614, Salazar wrote a sentence I consider one of the wisest in the whole history of religion. He wrote in essence, "There were neither witches nor bewitched until people began to talk and write about them." Let that sink in for a moment. The belief in witches, Salazar says, creates the very witches it claims to find. The talking about the monster is the monster. And the Spanish Inquisition, out of all institutions, listened to him. In 1614, it issued new instructions: extreme caution, distrust of confessions, no conviction on the word of another witch alone. It was effectively the end of witch burnings in Spain. All of this was set down by the Danish historian Gustav Henningson in his standard work of 1980, fittingly titled The Witch's Advocate. And for comfort, or perhaps as bitter irony, in Portugal, the homeland of our Bruxa, there was never a great witch hunt. In all of Portuguese history, only a handful of people were executed for sorcery. The creature was everywhere. The prosecution was not. That too tells us something about who tells a story and what they do with it. Who was the Bruxa really? Let's pause and ask soberly, what lies behind the belief of the child-killing night witch? The first thing is bitter and simple: infant mortality. In earlier centuries, unimaginable numbers of children died, overnight, without warning, without any visible cause. What today we call sudden infant death or an infection. Picture the mother from our intro, who comes to the silent cradle in the morning and finds her child dead, healthy the evening before. She needs an explanation, a reason, someone to blame. And the Bruxa gives her all of this. A name for the horror and the hope that a pair of cross-shaped scissors will keep her out next time. The other thing is sleep paralysis. Remember the mother who lay awake, felt the weight on her chest, and couldn't move. That is not an invented detail, it's a real harrowing phenomenon that people experience all over the world. You wake, you're conscious, but the body stays paralyzed, and not seldom you feel a threatening presence, a weight. In Germany they call it the Alp, in English the old hag. All over the world, people set a figure on the chest. In Iberia, it was the Bruxa. And the third thing is the darkest, the scapegoat. Look at who was persecuted as a Bruxa, a Maiga, a witch, almost always women. And among them, especially the old, the poor, the widowed, the unmarried, and above all of them, healers and midwives. The very women who knew about herbs, about childbirth, about life and death. Women with a power that lay outside the control of men and the church. It's no accident that they, out of all people, were declared monsters. The most dangerous woman was always the one who had knowledge. 3 women and a man. And with that, dear friends, we come to the great arc of our whole series. Look once more at who we've met. Lady Midday, the Striga, the Bruxa. And between them, the Leshy. 3 women, 1 man. Did you notice? That's no accident, it's a map of human fear. The 3 female monsters lurk where life is most vulnerable. At the harvest field, in the cradle, in the bedroom. They embody the fear of the female body, of childbirth, of death that comes from within, from close by, from the familiar. The Leshy, by contrast, the only man, reigns outside in the wilderness at the edge of the world. The old stories divided fear up cleanly. Inside in the house, the woman threatens. Outside in the forest, the man. And above all 3 women stands the same ancient ancestress. Call her what you like. The Mesopotamian Lamashtu, the Hebrew Lilith, who by legend was Adam's first wife and refused to obey. The Greek Lamia, the Roman Strix, and her daughters Striga, Strigoi, Striga, and Bruxa. Again and again, across millennia and continents, humanity invents the same figure. The woman who comes in the night to take the children and the men. The woman who cannot be controlled. Closing thoughts. And here at the end of our journey, we come back to the question that has accompanied us through all of the 4 episodes. Who tells the story and why? We've dug up 4 creatures, and under every single one in the end lay a human being. Under Lady Midday, the exhausted maidservant who collapsed of heat stroke in the field. Under the Striga, the child born with 2 rows of teeth who never had a chance. Under the Leshy, the ancient respect for a forest that was bigger than we were. And under the Bruxa, the old woman at the village edge, the midwife, the healer, the widow whose only crime was to possess a knowledge that frightened the powerful. The monsters, as we've learned on this whole journey, rarely came from the crypt, the field, the forest. They came from us, from our fear of death in the cradle, of getting lost in the woods, of the woman who was different. We gave the incomprehensible a face, a name, a sickle, a scream, a long tooth even. And then sometimes we burned real people for that face. And there's also the other end of the story. There's Salazar, the inquisitor, who looked and said, "There's nothing here." There never were witches, only the talking about them. And perhaps that's the true lesson of this whole series. These old stories are wonderful, they're chilling, they're a treasure, and I will always love them and always keep telling about them. But we should not forget to see them for what they are. Mirrors of our own fear, never as a verdict on another human being. Tell each other the stories, enjoy the shiver, and then when the lights come up, look at the woman at the village edge and see a woman. That was our little series on the real myth behind the monsters of The Witcher. Thank you for walking the whole journey with me, from the noonday sun to the Portuguese night. It's been a joy, as few things are. And who knows what monsters we'll dig out of the earth next. Until then, hang a pair of scissors over the cradle if it sets your mind at ease. But the garlic, maybe you want to keep that for cooking. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Your friend, Chris.